Hello, everybody. Welcome to Film Family. Today, we're going to be counting down our top 10 superhero/comic book movies of the 2010s. So, as
AKA
we start,
Marvel list.
all right, you have to say it. So, as starting,
For me,
yeah, we start with the animated movies, and as we go down our favorite movies of the decade, we're going to be discussing the superhero ones. Obviously, superhero movies have been such a big part of cinematic culture this day, depending on who you're talking to. They are a big part of just the box office. Without them, this film industry probably would suffer some extreme financial losses. Marvel obviously had a big decade. DC did some great stuff. There's some independent stuff. We got more independent stuff based off of Dark Horse comic books and whatnot. And it's just been a great decade. In my opinion, it's pretty unarguable. It's been the best decade for comic book movies. The only other competition was 2000s, and they only have 6 good movies compared to the many of this decade. So, yeah, I think it's just been a really solid decade for these movies. And without any further ado, let's get to our honorable mentions. Taj?
I only have one honorable mention, and that is Deadpool. Deadpool did not make my top 10.
1 and 2?
Huh? 1 and 2.
So which ones are they both honorable mentions?
No, just Deadpool.
Just Deadpool 1?
Just Deadpool 1. I love Ryan Reynolds. He was made to play this part. But, yeah, it was... I remember liking it in the theater. I remember loving, the comedy and everything like that. Came down to rewatchability in that aspect of it. And I think Deadpool 2 kind of... I don't want to say killed the momentum for me, but it made Deadpool 1 less special.
It was very gimmicky.
Yeah,
for sure.
In that way. I don't like where they were taking it. So, yeah, I would say that would be my honorable mention.
Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home are my honorable mentions because it's actually a bias. The reason why I didn't make my list, I really like Tobey Maguire. I grew up with that, except Spider-Man 2. I just really like the first trilogy, but he did a great job in these movies, and I really think that they actually... Unbiasedly, they may be better than the first 3.
Wait, Spider-Man 2 you think is the worst of the trilogy?
Yes. I'm not a fan of Spider-Man 2.
We'll do another debate on that.
That'll be something else. Deadpool 1 and 2 are in my honorable mentions.
Okay. Yeah.
Avengers, Age of Ultron, Man of Steel, Chronicle.
Okay.
Yeah, so I also have the 2 Deadpools, Chronicle. I have Dredd. I have Man of Steel, Wonder Woman.
Dredd was good.
Yeah, I have X-Men First Class, Black Panther, and I think I was going to put one Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So, yeah, it was really tough making this list, and some of these movies were just neck and neck, and I just had to kick some out, which I felt a little bad about, but, got my finalized list. So, let's get started. Number 10, Taj?
Number 10 for me is a movie that I watched a couple of times. I feel very solid with it being number 10. I don't think it deserves to be any higher, but I really enjoyed Black Panther. There's some faults with it, but in terms of, I knew nothing about Black Panther, the comic or anything, the character. Saw this with my cousins, and some of them were super hyped when they watched it. And I don't know, just something about it. I love the world building of it. I love the character to the point where he was in other movies, which will be further down the list. Just a strong character that I just really love. So I love Black Panther.
Number 10 for me is Captain America, and I feel like it's a good number 10 because I feel like there's so many good movies it just goes higher and higher, in my opinion. So the reason why I was saying Captain America is because I felt like with the superhero movie, there's kind of a standard. I felt like Captain America went above that standard, and they kind of incorporated a couple of things.
Okay.
And I feel like, actually, to be honest, most of the movies, all the movies on my list are above that standard, and that's why I put Avengers: Age of Ultron as an honorable mention because I really liked Ultron as a bad guy. I thought his voice and everything was really cool, but it was almost like a textbook Avengers movie, and that's why it wasn't on my list.
Got it.
So, are you going to specify which Captain America?
The first Captain America, from I have the year 2012. That's how prepared I am.
Well, it's 2011.
Oh, really? Oh, damn. Oh, yeah, it is 2011. I have it written down. I read the wrong.
Yeah. So before I say my number 10, I want to give 2 dishonorable mentions. One to Fantastic Four from 2016.
Thank you.
And one to Justice League from 2017. 2 of the examples of what
movies.
a studio can do to a film. And honestly, I just think those films are appalling. So, yeah, let's just hope that never happens again. It will.
Nice.
So, yeah, number 10, I have Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, the fact that this is number 10 show the quality of some of the superhero movies. I really love this movie. This is probably one of the few Marvel movies that I didn't have confidence in. Because of that, pretty much every movie after this I had confidence in, because I was like, if they can make Guardians of the Galaxy cool, they can do anything, because they actually managed to make me care about Rocket and Groot, which is, I still think, one of the most impressive feats of any MCU movie. Because I, being a pretty big comic book fan, still didn't know, or I knew Rocket, but I didn't know anything about Groot. I knew nothing about Rocket or the rest of the Guardians. I knew him by name. And so, you know, for me to walk into this movie kind of being cynical and jaded towards it, and just, you know, being like, you know, I don't know if Marvel has it anymore. This movie just proved me completely wrong. It was so likable. The soundtrack was fantastic. Obviously, everybody says that. Besides a weak villain, I really don't think this film has a flaw I can point out. I mean, it's so fun to watch. It was Thanos' real introduction. I know he was in the Avengers, but this felt like the first time we got to see him. Plus, Josh Brolin played him for the first time. He was just, he ate up the screen in that one scene, and that's not even like close to one of the best scenes of the movie. We Are Groot's an iconic scene. Their suit up scene's iconic. The opening scene's iconic. Everything about this movie just screams like, you know, watch me and enjoy me. It's more of a popcorn movie, but it's a movie that really has a heart to it, and it's really sweet. The opening scene is probably my second favorite besides Infinity War of any Marvel movie, and honestly, like, makes me cry. And there's not many Marvel movie scenes that do that. It's a really beautiful scene, and it's just such a likable movie. The cast has great chemistry. Like I said, the soundtrack's great. It actually has a really good score, and I just love this movie.
Nice. Number 9 for me is Spider-Man: Homecoming. The fact of the reboot. Yes, we were introduced to him in Civil War, you know, Spider-Man, but I didn't know if this was going to be a good Spider-Man movie. I was very confident because Marvel was involved with it along with Sony, but to basically have everything that I wanted in a Spider-Man movie, yeah, I grew up with Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man too, but at the same time, it's like he's my Spider-Man now, you know. And I just
Tobey Maguire is?
No,
Oh, okay.
no.
I was gonna say.
No. It just, I don't know. There's everything about this movie that I really liked. The villain, you know, it's just Michael Keaton just did an incredible job. The script was great, and I just, you know, I really enjoyed it. I can't really speak more about it in terms of, because all these list, I mean, the action, it had to be great to make my list.
We also did a review.
Huh?
We also
did a review, so you can go to that's a good point. You can go and see the review of it, but I don't know, I just love this movie.
So number 9 for me is Avengers, and I really liked Avengers, and it's at my number 9 because of the memory I have of it. You know, like I remember waiting for a combination superhero movie like this for so long, and it was just so cool to see all of them together in a movie. I think there's so many iconic scenes. The one I really think about is I'm Always Angry, you know? Or something like that. Then boom! That's just so awesome, you know? And I feel like at that time, for the time that it came out, it surpassed that standard. I feel like it actually set the next standard, and that's why it's at my number 9, because it for me now, Avengers is, if you're not doing this in a superhero movie, and it doesn't have to be all the superheroes, but the way they show their character arc, if you're not doing that, then you're not a really good superhero movie for me.
Yeah, so for number 9, I have a movie that, despite some of its hokey plot lines, is just a movie I don't absolutely love watching, which is X-Men: Days of Future Past. I think this is actually my favorite X-Men movie. Like, seriously, Hugh Jackman's so good in it. Not that he isn't always good, but he feels special in this movie because Wolverine's so good in this movie, and, you know, Hugh Jackman's always good, but Wolverine's not in the original Days of Future Past, so for him to be in this movie, I think it would really have to work, and he is excellent. James McAvoy does the best performance as Charles Xavier. He is seriously tortured, and you really feel bad for him, and you see he's not like the Dark Phoenix one, who you just hate. Like, he feels like human with, you know, flaws. He feels like a very fallible character, which is great about him. Michael Fassbender as Magneto is fantastic. The movie's also fun. It never seems to lose its energy or its cynicism because it's split between 2 different areas and 2 different eras of time. I love the opening to it. It feels very Terminator-esque. Like I said, the rest of the cast is fantastic. And the scene in this movie where young Charles talks to old Charles, they have this little moment, is seriously one of my favorite scenes in any superhero movie at all. It gives me chills when I watch it. It's beautiful. Jennifer Lawrence is really good in this movie. It's so fun to watch. Even though the ending is a little like, what was that? I still really love this movie, and it never fails to just get me excited. It feels like the closest thing the X-Men have to an Avengers movie, because right when they started, they had all their people and they had all their ducks in a row, and they were like, well, we have all their people, we could just add a couple of members. This movie felt like people meeting up and true team-ups, and I just love watching this film.
I agree. Number 8 for me was Logan. Logan was a movie that I just... at this point, I knew Hugh Jackman was incredible as Wolverine, but I didn't know about Old Man Logan. I didn't know the comic and the story of that. But this journey with him and Charles is just, it's beyond incredible, because it had me wanting to see. I would have watched them for another 3-4 hours, just, traveling. And just so much heart went into this movie, but also it's there's a lot of violence, which is what's cool. Because I was gonna say Wolverine, he unleashes, which is what people were waiting for him to do as well. So I really enjoyed Logan. It's definitely, it's my number 8.
My number 8 is a movie I actually didn't think I was gonna like, and that's Thor Ragnarok. And I wasn't really a fan of the Thor movies when they come out, because I'm also not a fan of the Thor superhero just from the get-go. But Thor Ragnarok was interesting to me because I remember reading the comic when Hulk is in another... I don't know the comic like that, but I just remember the picture of seeing the Warrior Hulk fighting Thor. So to be able to see that in the movie and kind of that 360 or 180, whatever you want to say, that Hulk did from the previous movies was really cool. And the reason why this is up there is a superhero movie. I really like the way this looked. You got to see a lot of Asgard and the colors, the rainbow bridges and stuff like that. I really enjoyed this movie. Nice. So that's my number 8.
Yeah, so in number 8, I have a film which I would consider to be the perfect blockbuster, which is The Avengers. So in the history of cinema, there has been very few blockbusters, in my opinion, that have been this impactful, because once The Avengers was made, every other film franchise or looking to be established franchise was saying that's what we want to reach, that's what we want to create, that's what we want the audiences to feel, because everybody who saw this movie either knew somebody who liked it or loved it. So I don't think like anybody who hated this movie didn't know somebody who liked it. I truly mean that. I think that even the harshest of Marvel cynics or the most jaded of superhero fans will have a fun time in this movie. The comedy is pitch perfect. It's one of the absolute fun. It's probably my second pick for funniest movie besides Thor Ragnarok, which is basically a comedy. It's an absolute blast to watch. No character is really bad. Captain America's not at his best. They definitely did better later, but he's still likable. But Hawkeye's great for his introduction. Black Widow's great. Bruce Banner's never been better in any MCU movie. Tony Stark's fantastic. And Thor, he actually needs some work too. But like their chemistry is just palpable. The fact that this movie was so successful was pretty much Marvel just saying, yeah, so this is going to be our little domain for the next couple of years. And they pretty much said that for the near cinematic future, it was going to be, the industry was going to be theirs. And they ensured that with this movie. The previous 5 MCU movies had some good ones, had some not so good ones, and had whatever. But really, I feel like every criticism you could make is just sort of kind of forgotten in this movie, because this movie is just pure fun. And it's got, I still think, probably the most perfectly executed third act in any MCU movie. In fact, any movie of this decade. It's really how you do it. Like you said, I'm always angry. I actually remember seeing that. I was 10, and I don't think I've ever screamed that much in a movie theater besides maybe the Darth Vader Rogue One scene. Like seriously, it was just extremely I don't even know how to describe it. It's the type of feeling that you go to the movies to get.
Electrifying.
There you go. And I really think this is, like I said, a perfect blockbuster. Even though this film's not too, excited or interested in some of the deeper parts of the characters, it doesn't care to be or doesn't need to be, because it is the most fun time you'll have in any Marvel movie, in my opinion.
Yeah. Number 7 for me is X-Men Days of Future Past. And the reason for that is just because I had no faith in the X-Men series at that point. I remember going in, watching this, and just being giddy from the start to the end. Wolverine wasn't, Hugh Jackman was incredible in this movie. you throw time travel into anything for me, I'm like a sucker for it, as you can tell. And the fact that it's like it was like rewriting the past and having to fix certain things, and you put superheroes in it, and the payoff at the end with it kind of coming full circle and things getting fixed up again in terms of relationships and people that had been dead and stuff like that. It just had such a big payoff too that it kind of made the sting for the next X-Men even worse, basically, because it revived your faith, and then all of a sudden it dropped.
Just kidding.
Yeah, it's just kidding. We're not going to do that. But yeah, so that would be my.
I just want to say before we continue.
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman is awesome as Wolverine, in my opinion, in everyone. Even the one where he went to Japan and fought the.
I'd watch him. Yeah, I'd watch him in space, like just running around.
I just love this guy.
No, but I mean, and the funny thing is, people I know on the internet complained because of his height. Yeah, too height.
Really?
Too tall.
He's
Yeah,
too tall?
in the
I've
beginning,
heard that.
because
He's perfect.
Wolverine's supposed to be small. Yeah.
So my number 7 is Captain America: Winter Soldier.
No.
I really like this as a superhero movie because there was a human element that is, I feel like it's hard to get, and Marvel does it very well. But it was just in superhero movies because oftentimes they lose their mortality because they're so fantastical and they have these abilities. But I feel like you really see Captain America's integrity as a character and where that kind of sets up the building for, the next couple of Captain America movies and the Avengers movies. So for me, I really like this movie.
Nice.
Yeah, so for number 7, I have a film that I actually really wanted to put higher, and when I was making my list, I just couldn't because upon rewatches, I don't think the film gets worse, but in some ways that the internet has kind of ruined this movie, which kind of sucks. But The Dark Knight Rises, I feel like, had an almost impossible task of living up to the magnum opus that was The Dark Knight, which many still consider to be the greatest superhero film of all time. I feel like this movie was just not going to please everybody, and it didn't. But this film certainly pleased me. I had a great time in it. It's not just an entertaining movie, which it can be, but it doesn't necessarily feature all the bombastic spectacle of other movies, because a lot of the times the Dark Knight trilogy, even when it's great, in my opinion, aren't excellent on action. Sometimes Nolan's editing is not for me, but it's never been too great when it's getting crazy, and sometimes this movie does get crazy. But some of the fights are just really entertaining to watch, but that's not where this movie's strong points lie. Its strong points lie in Bruce and the character of Bruce, how they show his mortality, his age, his cynicism and anger, and how bitter he can be. And that is kind of the point of Batman. He's never been happy. He's not going to be happy. Alfred points that out. And this is a movie where he tries to find his happiness. He has to fall, rise, kind of does it twice, which is kind of a flaw people point out, which I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and complain. But I just really love what they do with this character in this movie about the idea of never giving up, and you just can't give up, on people who have, even if they've kind of spit on you and hated you, you've, given your life to them, and that's something that I think is a really resonant message. And the music in this movie is fantastic. Hans Zimmer does a great job. Bane is one of the best villains who I think has been one of the most hated on because of the twist that he was kind of just a puppet. Yeah, I don't really like the twist either. I think it was a little ham-fisted and not necessarily needed. But what Tom Hardy brings to the screen, from doing a simple thing like putting his hand on somebody's shoulder to just talking, to putting his hands on his little vest thing, everything about his performance screams just intimidation. He's physically and mentally and emotionally there at all times. He breaks Batman spiritually, physically, and mentally, and I just love everything about him. And this is a great film. And also, this is a controversial opinion, I guess, but the scene where Bruce escapes the pit in this movie is the best scene in the entire trilogy. It's better than the interrogation scene from The Dark Knight or the hospital scene or any other scene from the trilogy. I think it's a brilliant and beautifully directed scene.
Number 6 for me, 100% is Live, Die, and Repeat, Edge of Tomorrow. I saw this. I don't usually typically see a movie twice in the theater. I saw this movie 3 times in the theater. I actually bought the Blu-ray and the DVD of it. That's saying a lot, but I personally love Tom Cruise and what he brings to a movie. But the fact that this is like a Groundhog's Day kind of vibe to it, with action and everything like that, it added to it in that way. And I really like the story, maybe because it had like a Japanese anime flair to it, because that's where it's derivative from. But I just really enjoyed this movie, and I know it's one of those movies that a lot of people haven't seen, so I definitely recommend you seeing it.
So my number 6 is The Dark Knight Rises. I really like the trilogy. I personally like the second one more, The Dark Knight, which I think is pretty universally accepted. But everything BG said, I agree with about the movie, and I just really want to add that this was one of my first times seeing Tom Hardy as an actor, and this really developed my I really like anything Tom Hardy does. He was very physically commanding, which I think is very difficult because obviously he's a big guy and he was in shape for the movie. But
For you.
What?
It's a quote from the movie.
Oh, okay. Well, he had I think a difficulty he had was obviously half of his face is covered from the mask. So I feel like it's hard to show emotion, but he does it with his hand gestures, the way he stands and the things he does. So because of that's my number 6.
Nice.
Yeah, so for number 6, I have a movie that I also wanted to put higher. Like my top 7 was all pretty interchangeable. Actually, like my top 8, actually my top 9, we're all just like fighting for number 1 spot. So that's how much I love some of these movies. But Avengers Endgame, it's a movie I've talked about twice, so I don't feel like I have too much to add about it. But in the context of superhero movies, I will say that I feel that it's a movie that is a little more patient. And yeah, I do agree with some people. There's too many jokes in this movie. That's pretty much every MCU movie, though. They could cut down a little bit. And the Hulk isn't perfect. And, blah, blah, blah. There's problems. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit and, dwell on every problem in this movie because there's not too much about the movie emotionally that really angers me. And at the end of the day, that's really what I care about first in Marvel movies is characters. And as I said, I don't love the Hulk in this movie. And honestly, the only other character in this movie I don't like is Captain Marvel. I feel like this movie would be significantly better without her. That's just my opinion. Most people's opinion, actually.
The same without her, though.
No, I mean, but it would have had like a lame entrance where they just killed the whole military. That kind of killed it for me. But whatever. Like I said, the top 10 movies of 2019. This movie had things that I never expected to see on screen, that I never thought I would see on screen, that made me feel like a kid again. It was a great conclusion to what they had done in the previous movies, and it really felt like it was different from Infinity War. I know a lot of people say Infinity War is better. I get it now, but I still think that this movie, if it tried to one-up Infinity War, it would have just seemed cheap. It really decided to take it down a notch, do a little more personalized storytelling, which has pretty much been what Marvel's bread and butter is, to give more character-based stories. And obviously, a lot of Marvel stories, are kind of pretty standard, and where their success draws from is the charm and likability and compellingness of their characters. So this movie does a great job, and it's obviously chock full of great moments.
Yeah.
And a great score, too.
Yep. Number 5 for me, this is going to seem like I'm a Marvel fan now from this list on. But number 5 for me is Guardians of the Galaxy. I know that you've already mentioned it, BG. It's a movie when I walked into the theater, and I remember exactly what theater I was in. I was in theater number 9. I was walking in, and I'm like prepared for Marvel's first flop. I was like, there's no way that a talking raccoon is. I'm like, they're gonna do it. They're gonna flop. And the idea that not only did it change my mind, I became such a fan of Guardians of the Galaxy. A lot of people have made the reference to Star Wars in a way in terms of this group of people in space that you get to know and root for. It had so much heart. The soundtrack was amazing, as you mentioned. The characters were amazing. I didn't know anything about any of these characters, but then I think it took a lot of people by surprise because it became certain people's favorite characters in the Marvel Universe. And so I feel very confident giving this a number 5 spot because it's a movie that I did watch many, many times, and I love this movie.
A lot of people have said that Guardians of the Galaxy is basically just Marvel flexing their muscle towards other studios. There's
Really?
even in the honest trailer they were like,
Yeah.
You know why? Because we're Marvel.
Yeah, and it's amazing. They pulled it off. They pulled off something that I honestly never thought they could have.
My number 5 is Logan, and I feel like doing a superhero movie that's not necessarily positive or like in a good way is difficult because it's supposed to be a superhero. I love Wolverine. He's always been one of my favorites. Again, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine is fantastic. But the reason why this movie I feel is a good way to start off my number 5 is I love the writing of it and how you saw the attempt at a human life, I guess, from these mutants and how they're kind of on the run, running away. Sir Patrick Stewart, Hugh Jackman. I don't know the little girl's name, but even she was fantastic with the acting together. And they just had such a camaraderie, and you could see that they were kind of bouncing off of each other. And the color grading, the sound, the shots of this movie. There's so much about this movie that I really like.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so my number 5 is actually Avengers Infinity War, which just, surpassed Endgame. And this is definitely the movie with, I think, the least on its mind out of any of the 10 movies on this list. Actually, I mean, it's both this and the Avengers. And I don't mean that as an insult, but this movie's clearly just trying to pretty much put as much in it as it can. And I usually use that as an insult, but the way this movie is paced, even if you hate Marvel, I think you should look to this movie to show how you pace a block or any film you're trying to use to engage your audiences. The way it peppers through action sequences and character moments and dialogue, I don't even understand how they did this. And I remember this movie, ever since Thanos was shown, was being hyped up as the biggest thing ever. And if it didn't, surpass all expectations and wasn't fantastic, it would have been a complete failure. Thankfully, it was just one of the most exhilarating movies I've ever watched in the theater. I had a fantastic time. Captain America and Thor dropped 2 of the best movie entrances ever. I don't care what anybody says. The theater went insane during those. Thanos etched his name along, some of the greatest cinematic villains in history. Josh Brolin was excellent, and he was the best part in a movie full of best parts. And to be that just compelling of a character, who we hadn't even seen more than 5 minutes of before, in a movie full of characters who you loved and had already been established, and who were doing great things in that movie, especially Thor. Takes so much talent from a writing perspective, from a directing perspective, from a storytelling, and I love everything about this movie. The action is great. The way the movie moves is great. The opening is so intense and so enthralling. Every time I see it, I just get excited, like I know what I'm about to watch. But just the way they use the camera with the feet shot, everything about it is great. And I just think this is. I don't think it's as perfect of a blockbuster as the first Avengers, but I think if there was anything that was trying to do that and succeeding, it would be this movie.
Okay, so for my number 4, it was the Avengers Endgame. And I know I've talked about Endgame plenty of times. It had the impossible feat of wrapping up. It's not even a trilogy; it's a saga at that point.
Longer than that.
Yeah, it's like decades. But yeah, there's certain things that obviously I didn't. Fat Thor is still something I'm getting over.
Oh, Fat Thor.
And and Intelligent Hulk, or what is there?
Dr. Hulk.
Dr. Hulk. Professor Hulk. Yeah, Professor Hulk, which is in the comics and stuff like that. It's just I wasn't prepared for. I thought he might Hulk out again and go back to the regular Hulk, but besides that, had me intrigued. Just comic book pages, on the screen, and characters that, are so confident in who they are. The actors are so confident in their characters, and you can tell. And it was written incredibly well, and so. It's one of those things I'm excited to show with my kids, and my future kids. I'm like, this is what you should see, this saga.
My number 4 is Civil War, because I feel like it was the Avengers that Age of Ultron wasn't for me, because it was the combination of the heroes, but also the differences in political ideas and kind of where they should go and how they should help the world. And that the whole storyline, and you could see the tension between Tony Stark and Captain America. That was really memorable moment for me, and that movie is I think I'm confident with its position.
Nice.
So my number 4 is also Avengers 2.5, aka Civil War, and my God, this is a fantastic movie. Seriously, I think this is probably the second best acted Marvel movie or MCU movie besides Endgame. Robert Downey Jr. is so good in this movie, and I think a lot of times people get lost in his character and sometimes even his celebrity. Like Robert Downey Jr. is basically Tony Stark a lot of times, so sometimes people see Tony Stark and they're just like, oh, he's cool, he's quipping and doing whatnot. But in this movie, you see a lot more damaged version of his character, struggling with some PTSD from Iron Man 3 and some guilt from the Avengers 2, and he's just so interesting to watch this movie. I love the scene where he's kind of breaking down how the kid dies in Sokovia and how that stayed with him and his mom visits him. Steve Rogers' movie. This movie, I read this online, so I won't take credit for this, but somebody said that this movie is when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, and that's just such a great way to describe the plot of the movie. Structurally, I think this is one of the most interesting superhero movies because besides having excellent action sequences, which it does, I think that this movie, from a pacing standpoint, is so well done because of the way it builds the disagreements from in terms of civil and actual definition of pretty civil disagreements, verbal, and then you see some personal friendships get into the mix, and then you see some past truths come back, and the way it all builds up to this crescendo, which is still, in my opinion, the best executed action sequence in all of Marvel, with the fight in the silo with Iron Man versus Bucky and Captain America, which is a brilliant action sequence. And the way it crescendos into that, and the friendship that breaks and has to kind of be rekindled in the next two Avengers movies, it's just all so well done. Not on top of the fact that they introduced Spider-Man and Black Panther almost perfectly, and I remember just being like, wait, why are they doing that in this movie? This movie has way too much to do. And then I thought about it, and I was like, wait, why did Justice League just do this? Because they almost did damn near as much plot-wise as Justice League, plus set up Zemo, made a very compelling and human villain. And I love the final scene with him and Black Panther. That's a great scene. And this movie's just chock full of great scenes, great action sequences. More than that, it feels like one of the more mature movies, and it feels like one of the most important in terms of a character. And this is really where Captain America became my true favorite character. I loved him in The Winter Soldier, and I think they did great development to him, but I think he was perfect in this movie at the great things of his character, the great characteristics that make him such a fundamentally important superhero.
That is my number 3, and
Nice.
So I'm gonna piggyback on that. Let's give some credit to the Russo brothers.
My list is a credit to the Russos.
I was gonna say, well, I was gonna say that my
Everybody's
ending
is.
list is just Russo. But yeah, I mean, as you mentioned before, I was gonna say that too, in terms of introducing Black Panther and Spider-Man into the universe, and I remember their introductions. That's the thing. It's like they became iconic too, and it's just like this movie is just. It also is like, which side do you pick? I mean, I was always team captain, but at the same time, you saw both. You saw what Iron Man's viewpoint was, and it was like no one was really wrong. It was just a matter of, it's like two family members fighting, and you're like,
Superhero marriage story.
yeah, exactly. It really was, and it was like everyone had to pick sides, and it was very interesting because I remember, which side were you on and stuff like that. But that also became when I had liked Captain America before, but it was his story. That's why it was Captain America: Civil War, and I loved everything about it.
So my number 3 is Avengers: Endgame, and we already said we did a review on this.
Yeah.
We said a lot about it. There's not more good things. I mean, I can go, there's no end to the amount of good things I can say about this movie. The soundtrack was fantastic, but the biggest thing for me is why this is probably one of the best superhero movies ever. Is because I feel like it surpassed that in the way that the characters kind of their whole arc came to an end because it was almost the last movie, but the way Robert Downey Jr. sacrificed himself and in that scene, or the way Scarlett Johansson sacrificed herself, and the way they acted it out was it could have been it couldn't not have been better in my opinion. Yeah. So that is my number 3.
Nice.
So my number 3 is such a fantastic movie. I remember 2013 where when Iron Man 3 came out, and I was kind of younger. I wasn't as invested.
Your number 3, really?
No.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't as invested in Marvel, but I remember I was mad after that movie. I was like, the movie sucked, and he blew up all the suits, and they're not gonna do any more Iron Man movies, or he's gonna be out of the movies. And I remember I was pretty naive. And then Thor 2 came out. It was like the most mediocre movie ever made. It's honestly low key bad. It's pretty bad. And then I was like, did Marvel just peak with the Avengers and all the stuff they promised is nothing? And then they came out with The Winter Soldier, which is one of the best, or I think probably the best MCU movie, just ever. It's seriously so impressive. I think this is the movie where they did a lot of things. A, establish themselves as being able to make quality solo movies that are on the same par and level as their team up ones. B, establish Captain America as a powerhouse character, because before I don't think he had ever been, as liked. A lot of people thought he was boring. And then B or C, just introduce a lot of kind of new people and make sure that the universe could move forward while still telling a contained story. The way this movie really breaks down, because the movie in its in its idea is pretty simplistic. It's just breaking down a man who's trying to stay the same in a world that's constantly changing, and that's an idea that I've always thought was so appealing. And I think that a lot of the kind of ideas for just people in general, a lot of people have become cynical in this day and age with certain things, with the digital age and conflicts and political ideologies and whatnot. And I feel like this movie really had something truly hopeful to say, and not in a lame way, not in the way that the first Captain America did. And I like the first Captain America, but in the way where it was like, oh hey, everything's great. It really said like, no, everything might not be great, but you can be great. And that really is a message that I think still resonates with me today. I think it's so beautiful. And that really all comes to a crescendo in the scene where he says, I'm with you to the end of the line, which is still the most emotional scene in any Marvel movie to me. That scene gives me chills every time I see it. Great acting. The action in this movie is ridiculous. It's so well directed, so well choreographed. Yeah. It's like a Bourne movie mixed with a superhero movie. And the score is actually really good by Henry Jackman. It's very kind of tense and pulse-pounding. There's not a lot of orchestral. It's a lot of just kind of more electronic sounds in it. Not really electronic, but you know what I mean. And it's synthetic there. And like, yeah, I don't know. I lost my train of thought, but it's just such a fantastic movie. I think it does such a brilliant job with Cap's character, set him up for so much great development in the previous or future movies, and it was kind of one of my favorite MCU movies. And I know I said Endgame was the best back in April, but I was kind of high off that movie's tales. I'd seen it 3 times, and I still love it. I just think that they have yet to make a better film than The Winter Soldier.
I'm gonna piggyback again. I mean, this is my number 2. Just because, yes, it introduced me to the Russo brothers basically, and not only that, I love the connection between Captain America and Bucky, and or the Winter Soldier back then. And it's just like, it's kind of like he's trying to hold on to his past. Bucky's the connection to his past, and there's times when I was like, just give up. He's this guy's bad and whatever, but he never gave up on his friend, and he always believed that he could help his friend out. And his action is incredible. The story is incredible. It did revive my faith in Marvel because there was some mediocre stuff, but this was like this set the bar again. Like, hey, you have to get to this level, and you better take it serious, and have that espionage kind of vibe to it. I just really love it. Robert Redford was great in it. It's just great movie.
So my number 2 is Avengers: Infinity War. I feel like that, for me, this is the cherry on top of the MCU, all their movies. It's hard to say that it's the best. That's why I'm using the term cherry on top, because I feel like, obviously it's not the last movie, but it was a great ending. I really liked how they kind of continued from the tensions that happened and the fallout that happened from Civil War. And how they went from that, repairing their relationships, at the same time introducing Josh Brolin as Thanos, and how the Avengers had to unite. And they basically went almost from, like, what does it say, like out of the frying pan in the oven or something like that. I know what you mean. From like one tension to the next. And I felt like that character arc was very beautiful, how they were so opposed to each other and still trying to bring it back, but then they were almost forced to for the betterment of mankind. And then the ending, I remember I was very upset about the ending, because like I had to wait another year and half of my guys are dead. Like, what's up? So that's why I think it's a solid number 2. Very solid number 2.
You tried to talk to me during the ending, like after the movie. You went up to me during the credits, and I was like, "Hey, don't talk to me right now." It was very quiet, somber type of thing. Like, how could you do that? So my number 2 is Joker, another movie I've talked about a little too much, and like I said, Joker and the rest of the MCU movies that I've put on this list are pretty different, and I think Joker annoys me a little bit. Not the movie, but I want to separate the movie from the people online who are like, we've seen Joker, so, MCU, what? It's like, well, you've seen Joker, and that does not make you better than MCU fans, I don't know why people can't like both. Maybe you don't like both, that's cool too. But I think it's weird that this movie has made people feel high and mighty because they watched Joaquin Phoenix work really hard. They act like they made this movie, Like, I get it's a fantastic movie. Clearly, I like it. But I just think it's weird that I'm not going to talk about that. What I think about this movie that's so great is it really does feel like an interesting examination of a character, which like I said, all the best superhero movies focus on its characters, because superhero movies, in my opinion, even the ones with good stories, have to have good characters. You can't have a superhero movie without. They don't even have to be likable. They can be deeply flawed. I mean, is Arthur really likable? Not really. But they just have to have a character who you can just feel for. You have to root for them. Maybe you hate them. Maybe something. But you have to be engaged in their story. And I was so engaged in Arthur's story. Like I said, this movie is carried by Joaquin Phoenix. Not to insult other parts of this movie. The movie has a great score too. Cinematography is great. The use of the colors, the color temperature from the warm colors and the cold colors and whatnot. But Joaquin Phoenix does such a metamorphosis, like I was saying in the 2019 one, and it's just something that I don't know, man. It's really unspeakable at times when you see him doing stuff, and you're like, I just don't know how you can act that good.
Yeah.
The one thing that I will say is that people who are like, this is where DC needs to go, I disagree with. This is not where DC needs to go. It's certainly not where Marvel needs to go, and it's not where anybody else needs to go. The Joker is one of the best characters in comic book history, and he has his own solo movie because that's how it works. We don't need, like, people are like, we need a Penguin movie. I was like, you do not want a Penguin movie. No. You're just excited for another Joker. But
you need a Man-Bat movie,
be grateful that be grateful that the Joker exists, that you got it, that it was this good, and just be grateful that it got made. But don't be spoiled off it, because you won't always get a Joker, you know? And it's something to appreciate. I love this movie. So yeah.
Nice.
Numero uno.
My number one movie is Suicide Squad.
Are you kidding? Oh my god. Oh wow.
No, Avengers Infinity War. Wow. Oh, okay. That movie, I had such high expectations for that movie. Just in terms of, I think I didn't watch all the Marvel movies. I know a lot of people that did, and I commend them because I should have done that. But I've never been so satisfied in a movie that I was so scared about. And just the ending of it left with a cliffhanger. I guess it's equivalent to what Empire Strikes Back would have been, where I was too young to kind of remember it. But I just was so amazed from the beginning to the end of this movie, and it's really a journey of the villain. And Thanos is such an incredible character that you guys are right. If they didn't pull that off, the whole movie would have fell apart. But it really did rely on you knowing all these other characters, from Doctor Strange to I definitely, this would be one of those movies that if someone said, hey, you have to, superhero movies from any generation, what movies would it be? This would be my top three. Dark Knight would be definitely in there too. It's just an amazing movie, and I just loved all the characters in it, and it's just like I never thought in my lifetime I would see a movie like that.
It's very cool. For me, my number one was hard to come to terms with because I personally don't feel like the Joker, that's my number one, falls under the category of a superhero movie because I expect grand action scenes and everybody fighting for the good guy. But like I said with Logan, if you can make a superhero movie dark and something that's not very positive, not very happy, and you pull it off well, I'm thoroughly impressed. And I wasn't excited for Joker, but I was very impressed by how Joker came out. Because as a movie, I feel like it transcends that superhero genre. And it could be not Joker, it could be the Joker, and it's just such a very good movie.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's my number one.
Nice.
Yeah, so for me, speaking of dark superhero movies, I have Logan. I remember seeing Logan in March of 2017. And I remember when the trailer for the movie came out. And it's one of the best trailers I've ever seen, seriously. And I remember being like, I hope it's not another Fantastic Four. And I know there's no chance this movie could have been that bad. But what I mean by that is I remember when the trailer for Fantastic Four came out, and guys, go back and rewatch it. It's an incredible trailer. And I was like, wow, some dark music, some good editing. You can make anything look good. Is that what they're doing with Logan? And when I watched Logan, I didn't even get it back then how good of a film it was. I rewatched it recently, and I really think this is a beautiful film. Though I agree it's very negative and melancholic and cynical at times, I think it really has a message about standing up for fighting, even if you don't want to, even if it's not easy, even if it sucks or it depresses you, but standing up and fighting for the right thing because you should, or because it's the right thing to do, because you're obligated to, maybe because you're Wolverine and you should, because you have powers and responsibility, as the old saying goes. But this is truly a film that I don't think has never been replicated. I don't think it has the pristine perfection of a movie like Dark Knight, where you can look at every little nook and cranny and frame and be like, oh, look how good this is. Every little line is perfect. But I think there's something in this movie that's just so deeply like moving that I don't think any other hero movie has been able to get before. I don't think it has been able to get since, and I don't know if they'll ever be able to get to it, because Hugh Jackman next to Heath Ledger, because they're two different, and Joaquin Phoenix, which are all three pretty different performances, drops the best performance in any superhero movie. Everything from the pain in his eyes, from the decades of his life, centuries of his life that he shows through his acting, from the gruff way he speaks to just sometimes just the pain and fear you can hear. He doesn't even want to do some of the things. Daphne Keane is really good as X-23 or Laura. Patrick Stewart drops one of the best performances in any superhero movies. When he died, like, I didn't really ever love Professor X. I liked him, but it seriously broke my heart. Yeah, it broke my. And then there's a great line before that when they had the dinner with that family, which is one of my favorite scenes in any superhero movie. And he's like, "This is what it should be, you know, people who love each other doing ordinary things or something like that."
This is like, stop. Why don't you stop and enjoy it?
Yeah, exactly. And the way this movie uses simplicity to make such an effective and just hard hitting message, and just a good movie with great cinematography. Great action sequences, which aren't even the highlight of this movie, but they're just fantastic. And sometimes you don't even because you're wrapped up in the story and the characters, and then you don't think about the fact that this thing is cool. And I remember when they had that final shot, they panned to Hugh Jackman just running through and screaming, and everybody started clapping. Like, this is when you see a legend, and they're doing their final dance. And that's what I wanted for Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, where everybody's like, this is the guy, we've been knowing him for a while, and this is what he does best.
This is what he can do.
And to see that, I remember some people were laughing, because, I don't know, he just looks kind of funny, but I remember saying, like, wow, this scene's going to stay in my mind for years. And it was a brilliant scene, and everything about the movie is brilliant. His death is, the heroism ideas of the movie, the sequence at the hotel where it's all, like, you know, static, and having the aneurysm, like... I don't know what else to say. I think Logan's such a brilliant movie. It's a movie that is not necessarily as rewatchable as an Avengers Infinity War, but it's the type of movie I will always appreciate that exists. It's the type of movie that I will always watch if I'm ever feeling down, because the movie shares your emotions of feeling down, but it says, like, hey, it's okay to feel down, but sometimes you just got to do something, you know? And, man, I just think this is a brilliant movie. So it's got to be my best superhero movie of the decade.
It's great. Yeah, that's a great one. Perfect send-off for Wolverine.
It's the definition of a perfect send-off.
It's perfect send-off, and it was a labor of love. He came back just to do that.
Yeah, they worked hard on that.
And I appreciate that.
I realized that was his send-off.
Yeah, that was a send-off. So cool.
That movie's like, I don't know what the worst scene of that movie is, but whatever it is, it's better than the last like 3 X-Men movies, or not 2.
No, I know what you mean though.
Yeah,
I know what you mean.
Geez, Dark Phoenix, could you have left him with
this? This is a personal side note. Like, Wolverine carries the X-Men movies in my opinion. I really love Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a statement.
But he really, I think that he was, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a fan of like, oh, whatever. He was robbed of an Oscar nomination. There was not 5 better performances. Not saying he should have won over Gary Oldman, but you're crazy to say he should not have been nominated.
Definitely.
But whatever. If you have a list of your favorite superhero movies, or you just want to tell us what your very favorite is, let us know down below. What did you think of our list? Whose list was your favorite? And like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.